This is the Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leagues Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, Bo Cook from Loan Market, BTZD, the official apparel partner of the Paracave Podcast, and the Parramatta Times, the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. Troy Warner here, and today it is the tipping podcast, and it is round 22 in the NRL, and it is Women in League round, where the NRL celebrates all the great women in rugby league. And just to kick it off, I'd just like to say probably the important woman in my rugby league, I guess, career when I was a junior would have to be my mum. So thank you very much, Janet, my mum. She played a big part in my junior rugby league career, driving me to training, to games as well, and also on the odd occasion washing the team's jerseys as well. She played a big part in my junior rugby league career. I only played for 6 years, but Mum was a massive help to me. So for rugby league, for her contribution to my junior career as well. So thank you very much to that. But to also all the women involved in rugby league. So there's volunteers, there's officials, there's players, referees, not only in the rugby league that you see in the NRLW and the NRL, but also all those junior clubs as well. So you've got a lot of women involved in rugby league in those clubs, the junior clubs. They are coaches, they are players, they are, as I said, mums, driving kids around to games, and, canteen ladies, volunteers, a lot of referees. Just everyone involved in rugby league. Happy Women in Rugby League round, and thank you very much for your contribution to the greatest game of all. Alrighty, now into we'll do the ladies first, actually. So I didn't do this last week, but considering it is Women in League round, and also now that the NRLW competition has started up, it is round 2, and I will probably do this each week now alongside the NRL tips. So this is round 2 of the NRLW, and it kicks off on Thursday night, 5:40 p.m, I should say, with the Broncos taking on the Titans in the game at the Gabba before the main game in the men's competition, the Roosters and the Broncos. Now, the Broncos sit in 9th after having lost to the Roosters. The Titans sitting in 5th. So they are just out of the top 4, which we'll see this year. So a few outs for the Brisbane Broncos. Ashley Werner is out for 2 games, suspended for a biting charge, the first in the NRLW history, so she won't take her place in the Broncos squad after being named on Tuesday. Broncos and the Titans. So the Titans have had a few good recruits over the off-season. Jamie Chapman being one of them in the centres. Emily Bass, formerly with the Broncos, playing her old club. And the Broncos, they have got Gail Broughton from the Eels as well, so a couple of new players to them as well. But look, I'm going to go the Broncos on this one at home against the Titans. The second game of the NRLW sees the Raiders take on the Roosters, so one of the new clubs in the competition, one of 4 new clubs. The Raiders, who had a loss to the Sharks last week, they will take on the Roosters, who had a win against the Broncos. Look, the Roosters, they are a star-studded side. They are probably premiership favourites to win this NRLW season. And I think the Raiders, again, they're playing before the men at GIO Stadium in Canberra on Saturday. So I think we'll see a good crowd there get behind these women as well. And being women in league round, the male side, the Canberra Raiders, they're actually wearing the same sort of uniform as the women's side. So they'll have the blue shorts on in their games. So a nice little touch there. So a nice little touch there, and hopefully they'll get a big crowd there, double-header down there in Canberra, their first home game in the NRLW. But I think they're going to find it tough against this star-studded Roosters side who beat the Broncos last week. So I'm going to tip the Roosters in this one. The next game sees the Dragons take on the Eels at 3:10 p.m. down at Wynn Stadium in Wollongong. The Eels and the Dragons, they played in a trial game a few weeks ago, and the Eels got them on that occasion. So that could be a little bit of a form for them. The Eels, they showed glimpses last week. They held the Tigers 8-4 for about 50 minutes of their game, and unfortunately the Tigers just took over and won the game pretty convincingly. The Eels, Zali Faye scored a double against the Tigers, so some great play there. The Dragons, last start, losers against the Newcastle Knights, the defending premiers in the NRLW. So they'll be out to get a win as well. 8th versus 10th. Look, I think the Dragons might get this one down in Wollongong. The next game sees the Knights, the defending premiers, as I just said, play up against a new side in the competition, the Cowboys. And this one is at Belmore Sports Ground. This is part of a double header at Belmore Sports Ground. So if you want to see a lot of footy being played, a double header, get down there on Sunday and support the women in the NRLW, women in league round. So support them. Great double header happening. Newcastle, the defending premiers, taking on the new side, the North Queensland Cowboys. You would like to think that the Knights will get this win over the new side. You never know. The Cowboys, they held it up to the Gold Coast Titans last week. Unfortunately, they went down 16 points to 6. As I said, the Dragons had a convincing win over the Knights had a convincing win over the Dragons, 32-16. So I think I'll tip the Newcastle Knights in this one. And the second game at Belmore Sports Ground on Sunday sees the West Tigers, who are currently sitting in first position on the NRLW table, take on the Cronulla Sharks. So two new teams in the competition, and we see first taking on fourth. So both last start winners. The Tigers against Parramatta, the Sharks against the Raiders. So this is going to be this probably might be the game of the round, I think, in the women's competition, actually. I think both sides are pretty well known, pretty stacked. I think the Cronulla side is probably a bit more stacked than the Tigers side, although the Tigers side does have a few more names in there. And as I said, they did play some great footy last week against the Eels. Sarah Tagatuki played a major part in that game, and Bo Vetty Welsh in her comeback game for the Tigers, the new team, the Tigers, after doing her ACL at the Eels last season. She was pretty good in that game as well. And so, look, they've got a couple of players there that are really experienced in this competition, but the Cronulla Sharks, they have some great players as well. They've got Tiana Penatani, Kiana Takarangi, Brad's sister, but it's the halves that probably outdo the Tigers halves, Emma Tonagato and Taylor Preston. So they've got some great experience there in the halves. So Emma moving from fullback to the 5/8 position this season, so something new for her, but former Dally M winner in the NRLW. So look, this is going to be, as I said, probably the game of the round in the NRLW. It's the second of the double-header games, and I'm going to tip the Sharks in this one. Alrighty, into the NRL. And it kicks off on Thursday, 7:50pm at the Gabba in Brisbane. It sees the high-flying Brisbane Broncos take on the Sydney Roosters. Now, the Roosters had a win last week against the Gold Coast Titans in a little bit of a comeback to form. James Tedesco, after having a week off, was certainly one of the players of the match. He had a hand in a few tries, scored one himself, so he is in some pretty good form after playing, after having that week off. But the Broncos, well, they had a great win against the South Sydney Rabbitohs on the Sunshine Coast, and they welcome back Thomas Flegler into that prop position. They lose Martin Tapau due to suspension, a 3-week suspension there. So they miss a little bit there on the bench. But, they are playing some great footy. Reece Walsh at the back there, he's forming a great combination with Adam Reynolds, the captain and halfback of the Broncos. So they are obviously two danger players in this side. But then you've got someone like Sheldon Cobbo on the wing who can score a try out of nothing. Herbie Farnworth, Katoni Staggs in the centres. They are going great guns. And obviously Payne Haas up there at prop. The Roosters, well, as I said, they had a win against the Gold Coast Titans. They've got a fairly full-strength side. Brandon Smith starts at hooker. So they've got a fairly full-strength side to play this game. I just think the Broncos will get this win. I'm hoping it's not 13 plus for the Roosters' sake. They're playing like as if it is a grand final every single week, but I think the Broncos will get this one and continue on their winning ways. The first game on Friday night, 6pm, sees this game being played at Scully Park in Tamworth. So a little bit of another road trip for the Rabbitohs, obviously playing last week in Queensland in the Sunshine Coast, but this week it is in Tamworth. So another travelling game for there. The West Tigers, I think they have a sponsorship deal with Tamworth, so they take a game up there each year, and this game is the round that they taken up there. So they welcome back Luke Brooks into that halfback position after a bit of a layoff there, so he's back. And look, and the big gun for South Sydney is Latrell Mitchell. So he was due to come back last week, didn't come back last week, so they've saved him for this week. Look, South Sydney in 9th position, they want to get this win and just stay in touch and get into that top 8. So a big in for South Sydney with Latrell Mitchell coming back, his brother Shaq as well. So South Sydney for mine are going to get this win. Cody Walker is going to love having his great mate Latrell Mitchell back in the side. Alex Johnston, he just keeps on scoring tries, which has seen him now on as outright number 3 on the top try scoring lists in rugby league. So how many will he get against the Tigers? Who knows? My guess is 2. We'll just have to wait and see about that one. So look, the Tigers, who knows? Who knows with them? Look, the last time these two teams met, it was only 20-0, and it was a game that the Tigers really stood up against the Rabbitohs, but when they were struggling. But I just think that the Rabbitohs, they need this win more than the Tigers need the win. The Tigers obviously on the bottom of the ladder, they would love to get the win and just get closer to the Dragons, but I can just see the Rabbitohs getting the win in this one. The second game on Friday night sees the Parramatta Eels travel down to Melbourne to Marvel Stadium, a ground they haven't played at since, I would say, 2001 or 2 at a guess. So back in the old days, they're relatively new days, so I should say, the Storm, they used to play down at Marvel Stadium, and Parramatta's played there a couple of times, but not in recent times. And obviously with the FIFA World Cup playing at the moment, that's why they're playing this game there and not at Amy Park. But the Melbourne Storm, they go in 4th. Parramatta just hanging on to 8th position at the moment with for and against in their favour. The Melbourne Storm, they're without a couple of big names, Justin Olam and Nelson Asafa-Solomona, due to injury. So he had surgery on his thumb apparently. And Tarek Sims is suspended. So a couple of big names there missing for the Melbourne Storm. And look, Sean Lane is out of the Parramatta side. Unfortunately, he dislocated his elbow last week against the Cowboys. It was a pretty sickening injury. And look, Sean hasn't had the luck of injuries this season. 3 major injuries this year. Broken jaw at the start of the year, a hamstring, and now the elbow. So his place is taken by Mr. Andrew Davey, who comes into the starting side. Joey Lussick, who played for St. Helens last week, and now he's playing for Parramatta. He returns to Parramatta. He used to, as I said, play for Parramatta. Went over to England, was playing really well with St. Helens. They released him, and he's straight onto the interchange bench for the Parramatta Eels. This is a great move. It may see Brendan Hands, the starting number 9, get less game time, which may benefit the side. Now, when I say that, Brendan has been playing 80 minutes each week, and for a rookie number 9 in the NRL, that is tough going. He's done a pretty creditable job to date, but just having someone of Joey Lussick's experience in the side on the bench, that may be a good thing, just to give Brendan that little bit of a break, and perhaps he may be a bit of an impact player coming towards the end of the game. You never know what could happen there. But Andrew Davey in for Sean Lane, and Wonga Blake holds his spot on the wing for Parramatta, with Mike Acevo still suspended as well. Parramatta, they have a reasonably good record against the Melbourne Storm. We all remember the first game this season, though. The Melbourne Storm got the win 16-12, courtesy of a Harry Grant try in Golden Point. That was at CommBank Stadium. But the Eels, and Storm, they're both on the same sort of form guide. 3 wins out of their last 5. The Storm, they don't lose too many games, 2 in a row. Last week they lost against the Newcastle Knights at Newcastle McDonald Jones Stadium, I should say, not Marathon Stadium. That was a long time ago. But the Cowboys defeating the Eels 24-16. So both teams coming off a loss. As I said, Parramatta will want to get this win just to stay in touch with that top 8. They're just hanging in there with 4 and against. And the Melbourne Storm, they want to hang on to that top 4 position as well. So crucial going into the finals. So, look, last week I tipped the Cowboys, and not many people picked up on that. They didn't pick me up on it anyway. Look, this week I'm gonna go back to the Parramatta Eels. I've got to tip the Eels. I've got to keep the faith with the boys, and they have a pretty reasonable good record against the Melbourne Storm. So I'm gonna go the Eels in a close one. The first game of Saturday sees the Raiders take on the Knights down there in Canberra at GIO Stadium. 5th versus 10th. Now, a crucial game for both sides, I guess you could say. The Newcastle Knights wanting to make their way into the top 8. They're currently sitting in 10th position. The Raiders, they're currently in 5th position. They do have a negative 4 and against, so it'll be interesting to see how they go there with that, because if they start losing games and they end up equal on points with other teams, then their 4 against will kill them. So they want to try, and their objective at this time of the year is not necessarily to score a lot of points, just score enough points to beat the opposition and get the 2 points, which is more important to them than scoring points in games. The Newcastle Knights, Daniel Saifidi is out, and his brother Jacob replaces him in the side. So relatively the same sort of lineup that they've had in the last couple of weeks, which has gave them a 3 wins in a row now. So they're going for 4 in a row. The Warriors defeated the Raiders in Golden Point 21-20, courtesy of a Shaun Johnson field goal last week in New Zealand. So they will want to get back into the groove of winning. They've won 3 out of their last 5, and the 2 that they've lost were against the Warriors. So how's that? But the Knights, out of these 2 teams at the moment, are the form team, having beat the Bulldogs, the Tigers and the Melbourne Storm. The last time they met was way back in March this year. So very early on in the competition, the Knights got the win 24-14. I just think down in Canberra, I think the Raiders will get this win against the Knights. The next game on Super Saturday sees the Dragons take on the Sea Eagles at Wollongong, Wynn Stadium in Wollongong. Now, Manly had a great win against the Cronulla Sharks last week. The Dragons just got away with beating the Tigers 18-14. So, look, the Dragons, they grow another leg down in Wollongong, I think. They just seem to play a lot better football down there. I don't know what the reason is, but I just think they play a lot better football down there. The Sea Eagles, Lachlan Croker plays his 100th NRL game, so congratulations to Lachlan. And also their captain, Daly Cherry Evans, brings up his 300th game in the NRL, so congratulations, Daly. He becomes the 49th player to play 300 games. It's his 7th season as Manly captain. He's played 22 Origins for Queensland. Congratulations to Daly on reaching 300 games for Manly. There was a time there where there was a chance he was going to go to the Gold Coast, but he backflipped on that and remained at Manly. So 300 games in the NRL, a massive achievement. So congratulations to Daly Cherry Evans. Few injuries to the Manly Sea Eagles, though, Josh Alloway and Taniela Paseka are out due to injuries. So that sees Matt Lodge go into the starting prop position for Manly after his mid-season transfer. So he jumps into the side. Look, I think after last week's win against Cronulla, I think the Sea Eagles might have a bit more confidence than the Dragons. They still do have a glimmer of hope of making the top 8. So I'm going to tip the Sea Eagles in this one. Again, I think it could be a close one. You don't know. I think it could be a close one. This is the first time these two teams have played this year, so it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. Both teams last start winners. I'm going to tip Manly in this one. Saturday night, 7:35 p.m. sees the Panthers take on the Sharks at Bluebet Stadium in Penrith. The Panthers sitting on top of the ladder up there, nice and pretty. The Sharks in 6th position, slowly sliding out of that top 8 position. A big blow for them is Dale Finucane is out for the season with a bicep injury. So a big loss for them, their inspirational captain. So a big out for them. They'll be disappointed about that. Disappointing for Dale as well, that he won't be able to contribute to the Sharks season. Wade Graham comes back into the second row and as captain, so he basically replaces Dale. Cameron McInnes comes into that lock position for Dale Finucane, so a good little player there at lock. For the Panthers, Spencer Linu is out, but it's relatively a pretty strong side, this one. The one that you've seen mostly run around each week. Nathan Cleary, he'll be all better for the run from last week. He is there at halfback. Tyrone Peachy, again in the centres as well. Dylan Edwards at the fullback. Jerome Luai, the forward pack, James Fisher-Harris, Moses Leota, the usual suspects there. Liam Martin, who celebrates a re-signing at the club until 2027, I think it is. And look, the Panthers, they just, on average, they've conceded 13 points per game, so the Sharks are going to find it tough to score points against the Panthers at home, who are pretty hot favourites to win this one, so I'm going to go the Panthers in this one. And unfortunately, Sharks fans, I'm sorry, but your slide may still happen again this week. Sunday, 2 p.m, sees a game played at Salter Oval in Bundaberg. The Bulldogs versus the Dolphins up there in Bundaberg. So a few of my listeners are up there in Bundaberg. Make sure you get out to this game up there in Queensland. Sees a good game. Bulldogs versus Dolphins. You don't know what's going to happen here. The Bulldogs, they struggled last week against the Panthers, absolutely getting whacked 44-18. And then only a few more weeks ago, losing to the Knights 66-0, but then defeating the Rabbitohs 36-32. So the Dolphins, same as the Bulldogs, 1 win out of their last 4. So they had the bye last week, so they'll be fresh, ready to go. Hamiso Tabuai Fado, he goes back to the fullback position, which he has been playing some great footy there for the Dolphins. Played Origin for Queensland in the centres, but he's gone back to fullback. Sees Cody Nikorima go into the 5/8 position. So Jeremy Marshall-King returns against his old club. Viliami Kikau makes his long-awaited return, as does Josh Addo-Carr as well for the Bulldogs. Toby Sexton is back for the Bulldogs at halfback. look, this is going to be an interesting game, although I think the Dolphins will get this win over the Bulldogs. So I'm going to tip the Dolphins in Queensland to get the win over the Bulldogs. And the last game of the round, it sees a game being played up at the Gold Coast. It is the Gold Coast Titans versus the North Queensland Cowboys, who find themselves now in the top 8 for the first time this year after that win against Parramatta last week. So they are on a charge at the moment. I think they've gone 6 in a row. This will be 7 in a row that they're looking to get. The last time these teams played, the Cowboys defeated the Titans 24-12, but that was a long time ago in March, where the Cowboys were struggling a little bit. But I think these days the Cowboys are back in form. Scotty Drinkwater at the fullback position there. He's on fire. Last week, Chad Townsend, he had a great game against Parramatta. They've suffered a few injuries in that game last week. Griffin Neem and Jeremiah Nanai, a big one there for the Cowboys out there. So they've lost a couple of players there. For the Titans, AJ Brimson back at fullback and captain, which is great to see. They've got a relatively unchanged lineup. Still no Big Tino. Still another week or two away from suspension. Interesting that AJ Brimson has said that Jaden Campbell should be in the starting 13 somewhere. So I don't know where that's going to put AJ, but as you would think that Jaden would be fullback. So interesting to see what will happen there. But look, I think the Cowboys will roll on in this one and get their 7th win in a row and just really sort of consolidate their position in the top 8. So my tips for this week in the NRL, I've got the Broncos, the Rabbitohs, the Eels, the Raiders, the Sea Eagles, the Panthers, and the Dolphins, and the Cowboys, with the New Zealand Warriors, who are massively in form at the moment, sitting in 3rd position, I think it is. They got the bye this week, so timely bye for them, and they'll be ready to go next week in round 23. But once again, thank you very much to the women in league in whatever role you play, whether it be a player, an official, a volunteer, a mum, a sister, a cousin, whatever your role is within rugby league, both senior and junior. We thank you very much for your contribution to the greatest game of all. Celebrate the women in league this weekend. If your team has a women in league jersey, hopefully we see a lot of those out and about this weekend. If your club doesn't have one out this season, then pop on, if you've got one, put on a jersey from previous seasons and just really celebrate the women in the league, because they do a great job each and every year in and around the game of rugby league. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. I hope your team wins this weekend. Let me know if you're going to follow my tips. Last week I got 6 out of 8. Not bad effort, but not a perfect round like the week before. But let me know if you're going to follow my tips, or if you have a different sort of set of tips as well. So let me know what your thoughts are on the games. Let me know your thoughts on my tips, and hopefully your footy team gets up this weekend. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. See you next time.